Have you ever stayed silent while someone destroyed your name, believing the truth would eventually defend you? What if that silence cost you everything? Stay with me, because today's story proves that sometimes justice arrives quietly, but when it does, it changes lives forever. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I read every one of them. And if stories about quiet strength, hidden truths, and unforgettable justice speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Myra Spencer. I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, people have trusted me with their lives during the worst moments they could ever imagine. As an emergency physician, I've stood beside operating tables at 3 in the morning while families waited outside praying for miracles. I've stitched wounds, restarted hearts, and delivered impossible news without letting my hands tremble. But nothing in my medical career prepared me for the day my own past walked straight toward me inside the hospital where I worked. It had been a little over a year since my divorce. I had finally learned how to breathe again, even if every breath still carried a trace of the life I'd lost. My shift was ending after another exhausting 12 hours, and I was making my usual walk toward the elevators near the maternity wing. Then I saw her. Carol Bishop. My former mother-in-law. She wasn't simply standing there. She looked like someone waiting for the perfect opportunity. The instant our eyes met, a slow smile spread across her face, a smile that never carried warmth, only victory. She stepped directly into my path. Several nurses slowed down without realizing it. Conversations nearby faded into whispers. Somehow everyone sensed something unpleasant was about to happen. Carol folded her arms and spoke loudly enough for nearly everyone nearby to hear. "So, you're still working all these long shifts?" she asked with fake sympathy. "I suppose it's easier than going home to an empty house." A few uncomfortable glances shifted toward me. Then she delivered the sentence she'd clearly rehearsed. "My son made the best decision of his life when he left you. Now he's raising a beautiful baby boy, with your best friend." For just one heartbeat, the hallway became perfectly still. The words struck harder than any insult she'd thrown at me during the years I'd been married to Mark. 6 years of whispers. 6 years of pity. 6 years of being quietly labeled the broken woman. All wrapped into one cruel sentence. Yet my face never changed. I simply rested my fingers against the old gold watch my grandmother had left me, a habit I'd carried since childhood whenever life demanded patience instead of emotion. I looked directly into Carol's eyes. My voice remained calm. "Is that really what you believe?" The confidence in her expression flickered. Not because of what I'd said, but because I hadn't reacted the way she'd expected. No tears. No anger. No shouting. Only silence. Sometimes silence is louder than revenge. Carol opened her mouth to speak again. At that exact moment, somewhere behind us, the automatic hospital doors slid open with a soft mechanical hiss. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow. Steady. Certain. I didn't turn around. Because unlike everyone else standing there, I already knew the first move had been made. What none of them realized was that within minutes, someone would walk through those doors carrying a truth powerful enough to destroy years of carefully crafted lies. And once that truth stepped into the light, nothing in the Bishop family's life would ever be the same again. The sound of those approaching footsteps pulled everyone's attention down the hallway. Carol finally turned her head. I didn't. There was no need. Whatever was about to happen had already begun long before she decided to humiliate me in front of my coworkers. Theo, the night nurse standing beside me, shifted uneasily. He glanced at Carol, then back at me, clearly expecting an argument that never came. Instead, I quietly adjusted the cuff of my scrub sleeve and let out a slow breath. People often mistake calm for weakness. They don't realize calm usually belongs to someone who's already carrying the truth. 5 minutes earlier, the day had felt completely ordinary. It was the end of another exhausting 12-hour shift in the emergency department. I'd just finished updating a patient's chart before handing the case over to Theo. "Go home and get some sleep, Doc," he said with a tired smile. "I'll try," I answered. The maternity wing happened to be the quickest route to the staff elevators. I'd walked that hallway hundreds of times without giving it a second thought. But this afternoon was different. Pink and blue balloons floated outside several rooms. Families laughed together. Tiny newborn cries echoed softly through the corridor. Somewhere among those rooms was Paige, my former best friend. 3 weeks earlier she'd given birth, and nearly everyone in town had been celebrating with her and Mark. Pictures filled social media. Church friends called it a miracle. Carol proudly showed off photos to anyone willing to look. I'd spent months teaching myself not to care. Or at least pretending I didn't. As I rounded the corner, I noticed Carol standing near the elevators. She wasn't browsing her phone. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She was watching the hallway. Waiting for me. The smile on her face told me this meeting wasn't an accident. It was something she'd planned. And before another minute passed, she'd make sure everyone nearby heard exactly what she thought of me. Carol slowly stepped closer until only a few feet separated us. She looked me up and down, taking in my wrinkled scrubs, tired eyes, and loose ponytail as though my exhaustion somehow proved she'd won. "You know," she said with a satisfied smile, "people always told Mark he deserved someone who could give him a real family." No one spoke. Even the nurses pretending to organize paperwork had quietly stopped what they were doing. I rested my thumb against my grandmother's gold watch, feeling its familiar smooth edge beneath my fingertips. Ever since I was a little girl, that tiny watch had reminded me of one thing. Don't react. Observe first. Carol mistook my silence for defeat. "I suppose hospitals are easier than homes," she continued. "Patients leave eventually, but empty houses don't." Theo shifted beside me. "Mrs. Bishop," he said carefully, "this really isn't the place." She waved him off. "I'm only telling the truth." Truth. That word almost made me smile. Because the loudest lies are usually wrapped inside that very word. I met her eyes again. "Is that honestly what you believe?" I asked softly. Her confident expression flickered. Not because of my question, but because I sounded almost sympathetic. She had expected tears. She had prepared herself for anger. Instead, she was standing across from a woman who looked almost peaceful. That confused her. She opened her mouth to continue, but I barely heard the next sentence. My mind drifted years into the past. I hadn't grown up with money or influence. My parents worked harder than anyone I knew. My mother cleaned other people's homes before sunrise, and my father drove deliveries until years of lifting heavy loads permanently damaged his back. Nothing was handed to me. Every scholarship, every overnight study session, every impossible exam brought me one step closer to becoming the emergency physician I'd dreamed of being. People often imagine doctors live glamorous lives. They don't see the birthdays missed, the holidays spent inside trauma rooms, or the countless nights holding complete strangers together while quietly falling apart themselves. Medicine became my safe place. Inside the emergency department, facts mattered. Blood tests didn't gossip. X-rays didn't spread rumors. Medical records never cared about church whispers or neighborhood opinions. Patients judged me by whether I helped them breathe, not by stories someone else invented. Outside those hospital walls, life worked very differently. When I married Mark Bishop at 28, I truly believed kindness and honesty would always be enough. Mark had the kind of smile that made everyone trust him instantly. He remembered birthdays. He volunteered at church. He shook every hand like it genuinely mattered. To the entire town, he looked like the perfect husband. For years, I believed that too. Then came the silence no couple ever wants to talk about. Month after month. Year after year. The nursery we'd imagined never became more than an empty room. Finally, I suggested something completely reasonable. "Let's both get tested," I told him one evening. "No blame. No assumptions. Just answers." Mark laughed. Not kindly. Dismissively. "Bishop men don't have those kinds of problems," he replied. "It could be something simple," I said gently. "It isn't me." The conversation ended there. At the time, I convinced myself he simply wasn't ready. So I went alone. Every test. Every examination. Every report came back with exactly the same conclusion. I was completely healthy. I sat alone inside my car staring at those results, expecting relief. Instead, all I felt was confusion. If nothing was wrong with me, why was everyone already beginning to believe there was? I didn't realize it then. But somewhere behind my back, a completely different story had already begun spreading through town. And the first person carrying it wasn't a stranger. It was my own husband. Mark never accused me to my face. That would have required honesty. Instead, he chose something far more dangerous. He whispered a quiet sentence to his mother here, a concerned conversation after church there, just enough to plant doubt without ever sounding cruel. Before long, those whispers became accepted as fact. Carol carried them everywhere she went. At church dinners, neighborhood gatherings, charity events, she'd lower her voice, place a sympathetic hand on someone's shoulder, and sigh. Poor Mark, he always dreamed of being a father. People would glance at me with pity. Not one of them asked for my side of the story. The lie had become easier to believe than the truth. The hardest part wasn't the gossip. It was watching the people I loved believe it. Whenever I felt myself breaking, I turned to the one person I thought would never betray me. Paige Dolan. She'd been my best friend since high school. She knew every dream I'd ever chased. She stood beside me on my wedding day, crying as I promised forever to Mark. So when life started falling apart, Paige became my safe place. She'd bring coffee to my apartment after long shifts, sit across from me on the couch, and quietly listen while I tried to make sense of everything. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," she'd tell me with a comforting smile. "Mark loves you. Don't let Carol get inside your head." Her words sounded caring. But looking back now, every conversation gently pushed me toward accepting the same lie everyone else already believed. I never noticed how often her eyes followed Mark whenever he entered the room. I never questioned why she seemed to know his schedule before I did. Trust has a strange way of blinding us. Sometimes the person helping you wipe away your tears is secretly preparing to become the reason you cry. And before I realized what was happening, both my marriage and my closest friendship were already slipping quietly out of my hands. I never saw the betrayal coming. Not because the signs weren't there, but because I couldn't imagine two people I trusted most choosing each other over the truth. The answer arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. I came home after another exhausting shift at the hospital and found a large envelope lying on the kitchen counter. No conversation. No explanation. No apology. Just divorce papers. Half of Mark's closet was already empty. By the weekend, the entire town knew he had moved into Paige's apartment. The rumors spread faster than facts ever could. Myra cared more about her career than her marriage. She couldn't give him a family. Mark finally found the happiness he deserved. Carol made sure everyone heard that version of the story. And Paige, the woman who had once stood beside me as my maid of honor, never corrected a single lie. For a long time, I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream that none of it was true. But every time I opened my mouth, I remembered my grandmother's words. The truth never needs to chase people, it only needs the right moment to arrive. So I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, but because I believed the truth was still making its way toward me. I had no idea that one ordinary afternoon inside my own hospital would become that moment. The smug smile on Carol's face. The baby she proudly celebrated. The husband who abandoned me. The best friend who stole my place. None of them realized that a single unexpected visitor was only minutes away from exposing a secret they had buried for years. When that courtroom finally heard one forgotten medical record, every cruel word spoken about me would collapse under its own weight. And the people who spent years calling me the broken one would discover who had been living behind the biggest lie all along. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with shouting. Sometimes it walks quietly through a hospital door and changes every life in the room forever. If this story touched your heart, take one small moment today and ask yourself, have you ever stayed silent just to protect people who never protected you? If your answer is yes, I hope this story reminds you that your truth has value, even when no one else is ready to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may give someone else the strength they need today. And if you enjoy emotional stories where courage defeats cruelty and truth always finds its way home, please subscribe and join this community. Your support means more than you know, and I'd love to share the next unforgettable story with you. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never let someone else's lie become your identity. Before you leave, I want to ask you for one small favor. If Myra's journey touched your heart, if you've ever been misunderstood, falsely judged, or forced to carry a burden that was never yours, then don't just watch in silence. Red heart, hit the like button to let this story reach someone who needs the courage to stand up for the truth. Speech balloon, leave a comment and tell me, what would you have done if you were in Myra's place? I truly read your comments, and your words help build a community where people know they're not alone. Bell, and please subscribe if you believe that truth may be slow, but it always finds its way. Every subscription tells YouTube to share more stories like this with people who need hope, justice, and a reminder that kindness is never weakness. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until our next story, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and never let someone else's lie define who you are.